Good afternoon. Almost over. And a little bit of mental food to sustain you through this coming year. Okay? Some thoughts about what I think is happening, emerging, and going to have an impact on our lives at some point. All of these things, I always put a caveat out there. This isn't stuff that necessarily is going to happen next Friday or November. This is stuff that is going to happen. And there's nothing I'm going to put up here that won't happen. I'm not making predictions like that this will happen on this date, this time. But I'm telling you about trends that will. I can't really accurately judge when, but they will come. And I think there's one thing we have to remember about all of the things that we've heard for the last 2 days. If there's one word that sort of underlines just about everything out there in terms of exhibits, everything that we've heard, it's the word technology. And technology is the foundation and the core of pretty much everything in our field, whether it's learning, whether it's organizational development, whether it's recruitment, whether it's sourcing, whatever it is, it's technology. And that is the backbone of what we're talking about. And with technology, there's no stopping it. So, I mean, one of the interesting things that people say, I don't like this, or I don't like that, or I don't think this is good, or I don't think that's good. And those are all value judgments. And they have no place in technology, because technology is neutral. Technology has no good or bad. Technology is a wheel good or is a wheel bad? It doesn't have any good or bad. So technology is how we choose to use it and implement it. But don't blame the technology. And you'll not stop its advance. And whether you like the invasiveness or lack of privacy of Facebook or whatever, and we can twiddle and fiddle around the edges and try to legislate and change it. But fundamentally, it's a lost war. So let's just dive in and take a look, see what's going on. Some of you have probably seen this slide before. I use it over and over. It's just an reminder, an underliner, that we've moved from a world that was somewhat predictable, relatively static, relatively slow, evolutionary change that we could assimilate, focus pretty much on today, and an assumption, and assumptions are very dangerous things, that tomorrow will look like today. And we all know, or we should know, that that's often not the case at all. So we've moving, and we have moved rapidly in the last few years to this side, where it's all about flexibility, adaptability. It's about dealing with ambiguity, complexity, interconnectedness. It's about all of the stuff that social media is about. It's about building communities. It's about interconnecting and interlinking with everything and everybody. And as soon as you start interlinking and interconnecting, you've lost stuff like the traditional notions of privacy and some of the other things that we hold so dear in the old world that aren't going to translate very well into the new world. So we've come from control, I call it, a world of constraint to a world of choice. And I'm going to talk a little more about this in a minute. Very fundamental, absolutely fundamental concept, I believe, in understanding the 20th century and the 21st. The 20th was about not enough, control, organization, limits, everything. Telstra, everything was private, was government-owned. One supplier, one controller. Okay? There were one source of newspapers, one source of news, and today there's a plethora. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. How many of you have seen the Gartner Hype Curve? Okay, a few people here. Gartner is a think tank in the U.S. that looks at primarily technology, and they take all of the technologies that you and I talk about, like social media and all these things, and they rank them on this curve, which is called the Hype Curve. And the Hype Curve is very simple. Over here, you have some technology that triggers some activity. Facebook gets invented. Okay? Typically what happens with a new technology, it rapidly rises up to what they call this peak of inflated expectations. Okay? So suddenly, wow, everybody in the world is going to be on Facebook. It's going to save us all, right? So you have this peak of expectation. And then most technologies fall into the trough of disillusionment. Oh, there's no privacy. Facebook's going through this right now. Now it's what? Privacy, privacy all this week, full of stuff. Zuckerman's apologizing for this and for that. It's in the trough of disillusionment. Some people are going, finally this damn thing's over. Don't have to worry about it anymore. And for some technologies, that's true. But for most or many, they'll move up here into the slope of enlightenment. And so what this hype curve does is kind of show you their prediction of whether it's going to happen in less than 2 years, 2 to 5 years, or obsolete before a plateau. In other words, it's going to be gone before it ever gets to that plateau. So if we look at what's up there, right at the top of this thing is cloud computing and e-book readers. You might say iPad. Okay? So here we are, right at the peak of this thing. Okay? And so you look at that, and they have given this 2 to 5 years to move to the plateau. So anybody adopting an iPad right now or moving into the cloud through your Google Docs or whatever, you're way ahead of the curve. You're basically 2 to 5 years ahead of where most people are right now today. Right? If you're into something like online video, it's far down the trough of disillusionment, and they're saying, again, that's still got 2 to 5 years to get up there. Because right now we're struggling with privacy. Do we really want our videos online? We want interviews online and all this stuff. Okay? And so you can kind of look at this and just see. We've all seen wikis, which now are very common. Lots of people are using wikis, and they're already up here onto the plateau of enlightenment, or into the world of enlightenment. So all of these technologies, it's a great little graph to look at and to refer back to. They publish one every July. This was July of last year. There'll be a new one in July of this year. And you can begin to track technologies. And part of the way that I forecast the future is looking at tools like this and creating other graphs like this and seeing what's going to be hot out there and what's going to really fall through the floor and what's going to keep on going. So given that, let's talk about some words. And what I've done is I've put up here a few words like personalization, because these are the words that define the next year or two. This has been around for a while. Time magazine came out with a cover probably 2 years ago where they have a person of the year, and that year they said the person is you. And that was very insightful of a pretty conservative magazine to understand that we've moved into an era of personalization. And look at this quote from Tom Malone at MIT. The fundamental unit of the new economy is not the corporation, but you. So when you think about everything you've heard in the last few days about how we recruit, how we train, what have you heard? I think if you really interpret what you've heard you've got to personalize it. It's got to be for me. It's got to be unique. No more mass lectures. No more recruiting anonymously. That's what, Steve Fogarty at Adidas was talking about, a microsite. Site specifically designed for particular kinds of people. Targeted stuff, because we're in an age where people expect to have a personalized experience. They want to be recognized for who they are. I know there's a company in the U.S. that's not popular here in Australia called Starbucks. But one of the trademarks of Starbucks is that the people that serve you coffee, if you go there very often, know who you are. That's the most powerful branding element they have, is you walk in the door and they go, oh, hi, Sally, the usual. And the baristas are trained to remember that, to personalize your experience. Okay? So what are we doing in recruiting to personalize our experiences? This is a challenge that we have to leverage technology to solve. Even though I don't and can never know all these people, how do I make them feel like they're being treated in a personalized way? That's the challenge. If I'm training you or developing you, how do I make you feel like this was designed just for me? And gives me some control over what I'm talking about. See? If we look at these articles, these are the trends. Personalization of the web, of websites. of having a newspaper page pops up that says, "Hi Kevin, good morning. Here's the news that you chose to see today. Here's what you picked." Okay? Personalization. It's CNN just has a new personalized website, video site, for you to personalize what you watch on television. I think you turn on your TV and there's nothing on there but stuff you want to see. There's no other stuff. And every time there's a commercial about cars, it skips it automatically. Well, you can do that now. There's HD recorders that will actually do that. So you can literally personalize what you're seeing and what you're watching on television. Right now the technology is clumsy, you have to be sort of a programmer to figure it out, but all that's going to change pretty quickly. New book just barely came out. A couple of guys in California that are pretty good friends of mine, and they're very smart when it comes to talent. And they're saying that rather than molding individuals to fit companies, we're going to have to mold the company to fit the individual. You're going to have to give every employee some sort of personalized experience. And I'll talk to you a little bit later about what that means in practical terms as we move down the road. But if you cannot amplify the individuals in your organization, each one of them, to be a lot more than they are individually, you're not going to be a very successful company. And this means leveraging collaboration, it means teamwork, it means all this stuff, it means leveraging social networks, all these things that we talked about. Second big word after personalization is mobile. And this one is, I think, one of the most challenging ones for most of us because we are very highly trained to live in a world of place and structure and time, controlled time. But this is saying anywhere, anytime, just in time, all the time. Time and place don't make any damn difference. Doesn't matter where you live, doesn't matter where you work, doesn't matter anything about when you do it. It's about what do you do. It's about getting something accomplished. The challenge for most organizations is they have no idea what they want you to do. And it's in there, and I say that quite honestly. They don't know what they want you to do. They basically want you to show up every day and kind of do like whatever. And we waste thousands of hours in useless meetings, in ridiculous quibbling and arguing and fighting that gets nowhere. And most of us, if we've worked at home or worked for ourselves, how many of you work at home a lot? Do you get more done? I think anybody who's ever worked at home says, I get 50 times more done than I've ever gotten done when I worked in an office. Okay? I don't spend half my day chit-chatting. I don't spend half my day in meetings that resolve nothing. I actually get stuff done. And that's the new world. We spent all of the 18th and 19th and early 20th century getting people out of working at home to come into work in factories and so forth. And it was a tremendously difficult task. You read the history of England and the Industrial Revolution, trying to get these farm people to come into a factory and spin yarn all day. Not easy. Right? Now we're trying to push them all back out. Not easy. Right? But it's going to happen. None of us will be working in an office building very much in a decade from today. Third one, choice. If I asked you, if I put a survey out, if you've looked at any surveys recently, the number one benefit that an employee is asking for, the number one thing they want is control over when they work and where they work. And I ask you, do you want that? If your boss said you can work whenever and however you want, would that be a plus? I think for most people, that would be yes. We want choice, we want control. Okay? So this whole thing about choice, it goes right along with personalization. I want it my way, not your way. So again, this whole thing, from little choice and scarcity to much choice. And just look at some of these things. These are examples of what we have now that are all, and I consider, surplus. We have more information that we can deal with. We communicate in more ways, email, Twitter, IM, Skype, you name it, voice. Unbelievable number of choices in how we communicate, how we buy things online, in a shop, from a friend, on Craigslist, however, okay? How we get educated. All these things are choice. The challenge today is not having this stuff. Our challenge today for most of us is, how do we deal with all this? How do you handle all this choice? So it's not a matter of learning and teaching our kids that you can't have this and it's scarce or this is control. It's about, how do you deal with all this stuff? How do you teach your children to deal with 1,000 television channels? How do you teach your kids to make good choices? It's a different set of skills than teaching them to be obedient, which is what we were taught. And we didn't have very good choices. New definition of prosperity. This is the most fascinating one to me. If I asked you to define prosperity, I bet virtually everybody in this room would tell me money. Physical wealth, home, house, something. If you're Gen Y or younger, that is not your definition of prosperity. We've come up Maslow's hierarchy. We've got the money. You know, we're not going to starve to death. Now the new definition is time and choice. That's the new definition of prosperity. What do you say if somebody says, yeah, I can work anytime I want. I can pick different projects to work on whenever I want to. Are you envious? Most of us say, geez, that makes me envious. That's why we want to go out and work for ourselves, because we've got a lot of choices. And we control our own time. And hey, if I don't want to work today, yeah, I'll come to the conference. I don't have to justify it to anybody. That's the new definition of prosperity. And so, you think about that, and you're saying, if you want a prosperous workforce, you've got to give them choice and control. You've got to let go to get. This is a very different space than we've been in for a long ever, probably. This whole thing about work-life balance isn't important. It's about building a lifestyle. And you're finding more young people are really focused on, what kind of a lifestyle do I want? What does prosperous mean for me? And it's a much more complicated answer than it was for my generation. A much more complex answer. So I'm just you can look at the slides later if you want. But the one thing I highlighted here is that personal branding is becoming more important than corporate branding. And if you have choices, if you're free to control your own time, your own work, your own place, then you need a brand. And so you look at all these people who are on their own now, for consultants or whatever, even if you're not. You're trying to create a brand with your blog. You're trying to create a brand with your tweets. All of us, in one way or another, mostly, are trying in some primitive ways to create a brand for ourselves. And, if you can really think about this from a recruiting perspective, we'll be very soon, we already are, recruiting people or looking for people based on their brand. So what's your brand? And how do you consciously and deliberately build it? Now you could equate that to reputation, but this is a lot more deliberate and conscious activity than the creation of a reputation. So what is your brand? And having one is going to be very important. The next word is transparency. And this is where things start to get really complicated. Because we want it and we don't want it. On the one hand, we say the government, we want to know everything. We want to know all the secret stuff about every politician and every mistress or affair they've ever had. On the other hand, God forbid anybody should see my Facebook data. So we're we're schizophrenic here. On one hand, we're demanding total transparency. And on the other hand, we're saying, but not for me. I want control over what I have. How many of you grew up in a small town? A few hundred people. Okay? Was there any privacy? I grew up in a really small town, like 800 people. Everybody knew everything about everybody for 5 generations. Right? I would go to school and nobody had to tell me their name, because I could look at you and say, oh, you must be a Wheeler, because you look like all the other Wheelers. If you have freckles, you must be a Parker. So absolutely no privacy. So if we're moving into a digital village, which we are, into these social networks online, you will not have the privacy that we have come to have in these urban, anonymous megapolises that we tend to live in. Right? We're moving back to the rural village where there wasn't any privacy. And so it's one of those things we're going to have to learn how to deal with that, which means you conduct your life in a different way. And I'll talk in a minute about that, because that's another thing. And Gen Y is sort of getting it. And they kind of understand that, you know, hey, the more you tell people, the less they're interested. You know? If you tell everybody everything, then nobody cares. It's only when you hide it that they care. So if you put it all out there, probably nobody's even going to notice it anyways. And they're going to understand how to deal with it, because their stuff's going to be no worse or better than your stuff. And none of us are perfect, so it's all out there. So a lot of the illusions we operate around it. So my whole thing about this Facebook thing and all the privacy stuff, it's a tempest in a teapot. It's a bunch of bunk. And I understand where it's coming from, but it's just not going to endure. And we're going to have a very open, much more open than we probably personally right now in our own lives would like it to be, amount of information about us out there. It's about sharing. It's about collaboration. It's about building networks. It's about leveraging that community to take care of yourself and others. It can be a very nurturing and a very organic environment, as opposed to the very mechanistic and anonymous environments that we've all grown up in, and for some reason really want to hang on to and cherish in some ways. It's about letting that go and not worrying so much about it. Okay? A lot less privacy is the future. Next one is conversation. I've heard this word numerous times yesterday and today from various speakers about having a conversation. Steve talked about having a conversation. This is about engaging in true discussion with people about things, about learning from talking and having the Socratic dialogue and having arguments. It's about learning in a very different way than listening to a professor lecture to you and write on the blackboards. Right? It's about getting engaged in the learning, being part of that whole process. It's going to be more about simulations and doing things online. They have whole chemistry programs now, totally virtually on the internet, where you can actually mix all those terrible chemicals nobody ever let you mix and see what happens. And you can actually watch them blow up and explode, but they don't hurt anybody. It's all in the virtual world. And you can actually do this now and experiment. That's a wonderful space to be in. And a big rise in the focus and value of emotional intelligence, of this whole thing of that EQ, about putting emotion into work and into our lives, and accepting the fact that emotion is good, where in the 20th century, in the corporate world, emotion is kind of a verboten thing. You know, nobody shows any emotion. And if you do, then that's a weakness. And in this new world, it's going to be a strength to be able to do that. And learning. And I just put up an amusing little clip that, you know, Craig Liddy was talking earlier about mobile learning. And all of us are moving into a world where learning is going to happen in very different ways. When I say learning, I mean learning how to do things. Now, learning how to do things is really straightforward. I can teach you how to open up a bottle of water or fix your car. That stuff, we know how to do that blindfolded. We're translating that now into technology. And what school and learning is going to be about is not about how to do. It's about how to think, how to respond, how to deal with ambiguity, how to deal with complexity. Not about how to do stuff. If you want to learn how to do stuff, watch this video. I just put that up there to show you how quickly you can learn how to do something. How many of you can fold a t-shirt like that? And now you can, right? Now if you watch the video a few times, right? But this is a show called Videojug.com. And on Videojug.com, jug like a jug, you know, J-U-G, Videojug. They have thousands of videos that are about this long, some are a bit longer, that show you how to do everything. How to fry an egg, how to change the oil in the car, how to pack your suitcase, how to tie your shoes. So, I mean, you put a little kid on here, and they're going to know more than you know in a week. Right? This is phenomenal. So, teaching people how to do stuff in fun, short, quick ways is very, very easy. We should be doing all of this for teaching how to do something. So, if you've got to teach somebody at work how to do something, you should make a little video like this and not worry about it. And spend your time teaching them how to think and react and respond to complexity and all these other issues. Next one is promise. I've heard this word over and over for the last 2 days. What's your customer promise? What are you promising? And this gets back really into ethics and integrity. And when I say we don't have privacy, when you don't have privacy, suddenly you must be ethical. The beauty of transparency is you have to be ethical. If it's all transparent, I can't steal the money because you're going to watch me steal it. I can't have an affair because you're going to have a camera tracking me down the street. Okay? I can't do things because I don't have any privacy. So not having privacy is a really good thing from an ethics perspective. Because small villages and towns, you had to work really hard and accept the consequences of not being ethical. And everybody in my town, not everybody, but a number of people didn't have very good reputations because they had done something that was unethical. And to reverse that is very difficult. So suddenly, if you've got really good transparency, politicians are going to be different, you're going to act differently, and everybody's going to be different. And young people are really focused on being honest and having you be honest with them and what your promise is to them around employment. When you go out and recruit them and you tell them, I'll get back to you in a week, and you never do. Right? When you tell them you're going to respond to them, and you don't. When you tell them we're not hiring you because we already filled the position, it's really because they don't like it. They know that. And so we're going to have to learn, how do we be honest with our candidates? How are you going to give people honest feedback? Because these young people have bullshit meters that are beyond comprehension. And they understand this. They're super good at knowing when you're lying to them. Okay? And if you want to build a relationship to somebody, if you want to, we talk about building relationships online, can you have a relationship based on lies? Would you want your own personal relationships to be based on a bunch of lies? And yet we lie to our prospective candidates and employees all the time. And it's routine, it's just normal, it's accepted. Because it's less difficult. So the whole new world we're moving into is a very different place around being truly ethical, honest, straightforward, building relationships that are really relationships, that are based on really honest kinds of interactions with people, and creating real communities of people who want to come and work for you. And then sustainability. And not just environmental sustainability, not just energy sustainability. I'm talking about sustainability of lifestyle and of working relationships. And you know, we used to have this a long time ago, and we've kind of lost it over the years, where people are really sort of indispensable widgets. They come and go, in and out, throw them in, throw them out, who cares? We don't really take a whole lot of effort to sustain our workforce or to maintain it, unless it's for some economic short-term reason for us. Okay? So this is really about reuse, recycle, retain, refresh people. So how do you look, what if you looked at your workforce and said, you got 100 people, that's it. Can't get any more this year. Would you look at that workforce differently than if you could go out and hire more people? You know, obviously, what if you just the CEO just said, this is 100 people, that's it. That's all we got, you can't hire any more. We're going to increase our productivity by 5%, and we're going to do more work, we're going to make more money, but you can't add any more people. Then what would we do? You got two choices: get frustrated, you know, get upset, quit, or try to invent a new future. How do we move this forward in a more productive and exciting way? And I think we're beginning to see this in a lot of companies, especially some of the startup companies. And so, I mean, I think these are the words that we have to almost make our watchwords for people. And just say that we should be hiring as few as possible. And we should be retraining and redeveloping and refreshing as many as we possibly can. And if you have limits to who you can hire, then you're going to do better assessment. You're going to have to do a lot better upfront thinking about who you're hiring and why you're hiring them. You're going to probably hire people with broader skill sets that can do more things. You're going to let consultants do the in-depth stuff. You're going to have a very different model if you take this as your model of an organization versus our more traditional model. So I think, you know, you're going to see employers seeking fewer people, better people. I think you're going to see a lot more focus on cultural fit and pre-screening. And I think you're going to see a lot more focus on outsourcing non-essential kinds of work and really looking at transactional work and work that really doesn't contribute to the revenue stream as something that maybe could be done by an outsourced firm or a third party or a consultancy. And so if you really look at it, you know, most of the work that we do, most of us in this room, are not core to our organizations. And we could be outsourced. And maybe we should be outsourced. And maybe we would serve them better and ourselves better in that capacity. Well, this is tough stuff to talk about yourself and about us. So just think about that for a minute. So my forecast. Everything's going to go mobile. Everything. The iPad is just the beginning. Already today, I was just sitting playing with my iPad back there, and I just saw an employment application that you can totally fill out on the iPad and sign it with your finger, and then hit send. Now, that's kind of the 20th century trying to be in the 21st, because I'm going to fill out an application like that. But already those apps are available for the iPad that's been on the market for, what, a month in the US? So, you know, it's amazing. We're going to be a very mobile world, learning mobily, recruiting in mobile ways. You know, I can envision that you're going to be talking to a candidate while they're walking down the street on their iPhone, probably in video, maybe interviewing them. Maybe you're going to ask them to go and take a pre-assessment test online somewhere. Everything online, everything virtual. Everything's going to go to some Dropbox or central place that you can tap into and get access to. Play and work is already going virtual. How many of you play any kind of computer game? Even if it's solitaire? A lot more hands went up when I said solitaire. Yeah. So, you know, if we look at this, you know, computer gaming is just humongous, right? Probably 50% of the apps for the iPad are around gaming. And gaming is learning. And you're going to have a lot of simulations that are kind of like games, but they're really learning tools. You're going to see lots of stuff becoming personalized in the mobile world. So that when it comes up, it's going to say, "Hi, Robert," you know, and it's going to know who you are. And I was just watching this, talking to a guy who's in Uganda, researching mobile technology in Uganda. And Uganda, mostly people live in basically what we would call a shack. And guess what their address is? Their phone number. On the top, outside the house in the shack, they have their phone number written. So your only address is your phone number. No street, no number, phone. So think of the power of technology. Imagine you could get all those phone numbers. You could talk to everybody in the world, communicate, SMS them, have some way to get in touch with these people. That's a fascinating transition. Finding people, using crowdsourcing, tagging, and networking is going to be a very interesting, and for the rest of this year and next year, this is hot. You know, I was talking with the LinkedIn guys earlier, and I was just looking at Flickr. And you know, if you go to Flickr, the computer, the photo site, you know, if I want to get a picture of the Opera House, I can go to Flickr and I can type in Opera House, and hundreds and hundreds of pictures will pop up there on the screen, and I can pick whichever one of them I want. And I'm saying, you know, why hasn't anybody figured out a way to tag people in terms of what you do and what you are? Now, if I could tag you as a consultant, author, writer, teacher, you know, whatever, you can have your own tag cloud. And you can ask all your friends to tag you. And then as a recruiter, you could tap into the tag. You could search in the tags. And the tags would do a couple of things for you. Number one, it would personalize who you are a lot better because it would give, based on how many tags you had and how big they were, you'd have a whole better picture of who a person is. It won't be associated probably with your occupation or academic skills. It's going to be associated with who you are. So it basically replaces recommendations. It replaces the need for writing those things on LinkedIn. It's a wonderful guy. Because suddenly they're going to put stuff about you in the tag. So I'm just saying, I wish there was a tag cloud for people if I was a recruiter. Imagine how quickly you could assess people and how you could hone in on what their real competencies and skills were. If you were looking at a whole tag made by hundreds of people that know them about what they do and what they are in that person's opinion. And there'll be some bad ones, but they should be, in theory, a pretty small amount of the cloud. It should almost be invisible in the cloud. If they're really big, it's probably not somebody you want to hire. So it's about, what kind of attack. So things like that are what you're going to start seeing. I think you're going to see that. I think the way we do searching, the way we do stuff right now is very primitive and doesn't really serve our needs. It's too complex, and technology is always about simplification. And doing something like the tag, that's just one idea. There's probably a million better ones. But that's just one concept. Right? Retaining and engaging through online learning communities, networks, and what I'm calling intangibles. And I mean, if you're part of a real community, you're very open and transparent. It's a virtual community online. You have links and ties to that community that are very deep. You're not going to just quit that community to go work for somebody else, because you're going to be leaving a lot of intangible friendships and connectivity and so forth that maybe you couldn't take with you to another environment. And so if you build in your organization a truly strong internal community of people connected online, sharing and engaging in things, you've almost automatically guaranteed lower turnover and a higher level of engagement in the organization, because people feel much more connected and much more part of the whole than these individuals in our little cubicles. I also, if I was going to get into the future of work, would predict the end of offices and cubicles. I think more organizations are going to look like this physically. And you're going to get rid of all those barriers and all the things that make you an autonomous digit behind some gray flannel cube and put you out into being part of a community. But more and more will be virtual. And the start of a movement from titles to jobs. And we're seeing this a lot now starting in the US, where they're getting rid of titles and saying, you're an engineer. That's your role. Or your role is creativity. And your role is technical. And you define that whatever you want. And you go to Google, they've got a lot of people on teams that are taking on roles. IDEO, the design company. Everybody has a role. Okay, you're the creative person and you're the technical person. Now that's just for now. I mean, you can say, I'm tired of being technical, I want to be creative now. You can try to switch over. So it's about having a role, not this silo that you're plopped into for the rest of your life. Now, he's an engineer, can't do anything in HR or anything else. But, how about just letting go of those and letting people move out into this idea of a role? Shrinking organizations, a lot more outsourcing, the use of contingent workers. And the last one I've got, big rise in the use of metrics and putting some formalization into evaluating and assessing people in communities and organizations as to what really makes them valuable, what really makes them a contributor to the organization, quantifying stuff that most of us in HR don't think is quantifiable, like, are you a higher quality employee than she is? And being able to actually give me data that will tell me that. And you're going to see many systems. There's one, should have put the reference up that I didn't, it's called Orca Eyes. O-R-C-A, like the whale, orcaeyes.com. They're doing some phenomenal analytics around some of this stuff we're talking about in HR. You're going to see many more of these coming in the various talent management suites as they begin to build in more sophisticated data analysis of people, their contribution to the organization, their ROI they generate, and so forth, which will ultimately lead to more of that one, more shrinking organizations filled with people that are a lot more core to what this organization is all about. A very different space that we're moving into. Like I said, I'm not predicting all of this is going to happen in 2011, but we're on the way to this already. There's already technology starting to look at this. We're already starting to move in the direction, and it will certainly continue in this way for a long time to come. So that's the world that we're part of. It's a world that we can't escape. And it's a world that I think the only attitude you can ever have from this is to say, like, all right, bring it on, guys. Let's see where it goes. But the worst attitude you can have is to try to dig in your heels and say, I don't like it, it's not coming, and I'm not going to go there. Because you're just going to get run over. You won't survive it. So, thank you. You can write to me, whatever, and thank you for listening.